Amazing. So, hello
Hi.
and hi to our audience. So, my name's Jess, and we have a beautiful guest with us today called Melanie. So,
Yes.
Melanie, I'm so excited to have you on today and talking about a whole lot of things, which are going to be tools in helping so many people actually find freedom and kind of journeying through struggles. But I thought it'd be really good if you kind of opened up a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I work at a nonprofit here in Nashville, Tennessee, called Mercy Multiplied. And so basically we are a residential program for young women from the ages of 13 to 32. We have homes across the US and a few in other areas of the world. And we just bring in girls who struggle with any number of life controlling issues, or who are just in a place where they're like, you know what, I'm not in a good place right now, and I just need a little bit of healing, I need a little bit of work, and I need to get away to do that. So that's kind of the core of who we are. My specific role at Mercy is I'm the executive director of outreach. So I love it. I get to take the principles and the tools that we use within our residential program and take them outside of the walls. So we're working a lot with churches and other ministries and nonprofits to share kind of, here's how we help people in the program, and here's how they can literally help everyone, including myself. I find myself all the time having to use the very things that we use within our program for my own life. So it's a cool job. I love it.
Amazing. And you guys do incredible work. And like, there's so many testimonies. There's so many people's lives just being changed through what you guys do. So,
Yeah,
um,
including all of us who work there, I would say.
I
You
guess,
kind of can't be around it without being changed. Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Definitely. No, I know that I'm really inspired by what you guys do.
Thank you.
And it's also had a huge impact on my life too, through
Mm,
certain struggles. So,
so
um,
cool.
we were kind of talking the other day around the power of renewing your mind, and how this is
Hmm.
kind of one of your guys' key tools that you get some of the girls to use. Do you want to
Yeah.
kind of open up about what that is, how people do it?
Hmm. Sure. Yeah. I think in the midst of difficulty in life, but honestly, just in the midst of life in general, I really think, that we all have an enemy, and the enemy is always trying to take us off our center, um, and, the Bible even talks about how our enemy is at his core a liar. Like there's a specific scripture in the Bible that says he doesn't hold to the truth. There is no truth in him. When he lies, he's speaking his native language. Like he
Mm,
is a liar. That's his native language. And so he's always trying to take us off our center through lies and through deception. That's always been his mode of operation. And so what I think I have found in my own life, but we just see it all the time in our program, our thought life is so powerful.
yeah.
Like it can, the way that the analogy that we use at Mercy is like a tree. And so a lot of times we look at the branches, like if you look at a tree, I'm looking out the window at my house and there's trees everywhere. When I look at a tree, I'm not really paying a lot of attention to the trunk of the tree,
Mm,
or I'm sure not thinking about a root system under the tree. You don't ever think about that because it's not what you see. Like what you see is the branches and the leaves. Well, that's what I think when we're struggling in our lives, a lot of times what we're looking at is the branches and the leaves, which, like, they are what they are. There's not a lot of things that you can do to change the branches and leaves on a tree. Like if a tree is dying outside of my window, I'm not going to go cut off all the branches and be like, hope it's healthy now. I'm going to be like, okay, that doesn't look healthy. There's got to be something at the root that's happening at this tree that's making the whole tree unhealthy. And
mm,
so we kind of liken our lives to that, where and what we call the branches are just the outside external things that we struggle with. So for myself, it can be insecurity, perfectionism. There are people who might struggle with addiction or an eating disorder or self-harm, and those are like the branches on the tree. Those are the symptoms, right?
yeah.
But underneath that is an unhealthy trunk, and we call the trunk the belief system. And under the trunk is this whole root system that usually has been created through the different things that we've walked through in life, and so things like divorce or abuse, or maybe the loss of a loved one. Those types of things can grow these roots of rejection and abandonment and fear, and
Mm,
then those things inform our belief system. So it's like our trunk is what we call the belief system. And so that is when we talk about renewing the mind, it's like making that trunk really healthy. And so that's kind of what and when it's not healthy, and when you don't have a good belief system, man, that tree is going to struggle. And
Yeah.
so we've all seen it in our own lives. And so we just we are really big on the importance of paying attention to what you think about, and
Yeah.
also the importance of understanding that you don't have to be a victim to your thoughts. We believe that the enemy will plant lies in your mind all the time about who you are, about who God is, about the world around you. And a lot of times we think like, well, if it popped into my head, it's because I'm thinking it. But we would say, sometimes the enemy is literally planting these little lies in your mind. And so you may not have all of the power about what thoughts go in, but you sure do have a lot of power over what lies you allow to like sit down at your table and hang out with you, if that makes sense.
Oh, true.
And so really that whole concept of renewing the mind is, first of all, paying attention, like, what am I allowing to come in and sit down and hang out in my mind? Because a lot of times it starts with just an awareness of what you're thinking about, and the ability to say, like, I have the authority over what I allow to hang out in here. And I can actually like realize I'm thinking this thing, and I can say, no, I'm going to reject that. I'm kicking it out. Like, you actually have the power to do that in your own life. And so it starts there. It's like identifying what I'm thinking and identifying whether or not it's true. And for me, and as a person of faith, like, my source of truth is the Bible. That's what I'm always going to go back to. I'm going to say, what does scripture say about me and who I am, about God and who he is? That is like my compass. That is, for me, like, ultimate truth is there. That's where it's found. And so if I ever think something that I'm like, that does not line up with scripture, that does not line up with what's true, I may not feel like it, but I know at the end of the day that that is truth. And so a lot of times it's just replacing it, saying, I'm kicking out that untrue thought and I'm going to replace it. We're really big on that. Like, you can't just kick something out. You have to kick it out and replace it with something. And so replacing it with what is true, what's true about God, what's true about you. And really kind of like, it can get so practical, this renewing the mind thing, because it's like, for me and a lot of the girls, well, not a lot, it is one of the things that we do in our residential program. And I do the same thing. Like, if you went into my purse, you would find stacks of note cards for different areas where I can sometimes fall into faulty thinking and things that just aren't true. And so I have different stacks of note cards of truth scriptures and truth statements that in our home, in our residential home, they say it every single day, probably multiple times a day, out loud. They speak those truth statements out loud every day, all the time. And the biggest thing to me with renewing the mind is that it is not an overnight process. Like, it's not one of those things. I've heard a lot of people say, well, I tried truth statements where I like wrote down things from scripture and I read them one day, and then the next day I woke up and still thought all the old stuff. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah.
You're gonna need to keep doing that. Like, it's not gonna work overnight. What we liken it to is kind of like hiking trails, where, when a hiking trail is formed, the way that that hiking trail is maintained is by people walking on it. Like, that's how it's maintained. If people stopped walking down that hiking trail, eventually the trail would kind of disappear. Like, eventually, not overnight, it would take some time, but as people stop going down that trail, it's going to grow over and it's going to disappear. And so we just kind of feel that way about our thought life. We have all these different thought patterns in our brains, and if we stop going down those old ones, over the course of time, they will disappear. I mean, it's even like science. Like, science says that we can literally retrain our brains in the way that we think. But it takes time, it takes commitment, and not giving up. Because I don't know, for anyone who's ever done this and really committed to the process, I don't know of a single story where it didn't work. Like, eventually you stop thinking the old junk and you start believing what's true. But it really does take an intentional process.
Yeah, definitely. I remember it was a huge part of my journey in recovering from an eating disorder.
Yeah.
Because my mind, like there was beliefs which are kind of being formed, and then my mind was just filled with lies all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I remember having to make a conscious decision probably about 6 times a day,
Yeah.
especially around meals. I would take a little piece of paper, and I'd write all the lies down in one column, and
Yeah.
I'd write down what could be the truth. And I
Yeah.
find scriptures of like, actually God has a plan and purpose for my life. Actually, He created
Mm-hmm.
me beautiful, all those sorts of different things. And it wasn't an overnight process.
Mm-hmm.
It took a very long time of being relentless with that, and even
Yeah.
writing down things which I didn't believe at the time, but declaring that kind of
Yep.
truth.
Yep.
Um, and it's a journey I still have to do today.
Absolutely.
Sometimes I'll get those unhelpful thoughts, but it's like, actually, no, I'm not going to let them stay. I'm actually going to,
That's
what's
right.
the truth?
That's
Um,
so good.
so,
That's so good. And we're really, big just on process in general, process and choice, process and choice. And the Lord works through process, and the Lord works through choice.
yeah,
And so for us, it's like healing is always in layers. Healing is a lifelong journey. And it's not an overnight one-time thing where it's like, I used to struggle with this lie, and then it just like it's never come up ever again. Now I guess that could happen for some people, but for me, a lot of the lies will try to creep back in. And
yeah,
sometimes it's the Lord saying, guess what, you get to heal one more layer.
yeah,
Like, I'm allowing this to pop up, but man, it's because I know that you know the process, and you're going to kick it off, and you're just going to be that much more free. Like, I think people, and I know that the enemy discourages people that way, of saying like, I thought I overcame that, and all of a sudden it's popping back up. I must have never overcome it. And I do not believe that for a second. I just believe that one of the things that we always tell people to picture, it's like going up a mountain. That like you can be going up a mountain, and when you drive up a mountain, you're going in circles, right?
yeah,
And you can come around the corner and be like, I thought I've already seen this. Like, this view is very familiar to me. Why am I seeing this again? I thought I'd already passed it, but you don't realize you're actually one step up higher on the mountain. And so I always think about that, because I think the enemy really wants you to think all the work you did was a loss. Like, you never actually were free. And then that makes you just want to give up. You're like,
yeah,
well, none of this works because it's coming back up. I think it's the Lord saying, I'm letting this come back up because I'm ready for you to heal one more layer, or you're
yeah.
going one more step up the mountain, or whatever. So that's a big thing for us.
Yeah, that's so powerful. No, because I know a lot of people who think that. They're like, I thought I
Yeah.
got with that, but it's here. So maybe I never got true freedom. But I
Mm-hmm.
love that. Just actually another layer, another
Yes,
layer.
yes,
Um,
yes.
so good. And so I guess like another thing, like I wanted to ask you is, how do people be thankful through their struggle? Because I think so often we can really just struggle, and we can't find sometimes anything good, and it's hard to be
Mm,
thankful. But Donna, just
yeah.
open that up a little bit.
Yes. I feel like the Lord is teaching me all about this, like, all over again during this season of this pandemic.
Yeah.
Because being thankful right now is oh, sorry if that microphone just went out. It's hard staying in my ear here. Being thankful is not the most natural response in this season. And so I just feel like the Lord is reminding me of the power of gratitude right now.
Mm.
But I think when you and I talked, I even shared about a season a couple of years ago where my husband and I, we went through our own season of loss, and we lost a baby, and it was like the darkest thing I'd ever personally gone through. And I just remember learning how important gratitude was, and it's a choice,
Yeah.
especially when you're struggling, especially when you're going through something difficult. Nothing in your humanity or in your emotion typically is like, you should be grateful. Like, nothing wants to be grateful, but it is such a choice and a place of willpower.
Yeah.
But I just found that choosing to be grateful is such a powerful, like, antidote to that sometimes strong influence of resentment towards God. Because when things aren't going well, when you're in the midst of struggle, or honestly just in everyday life, when God either doesn't act the way I think he should act,
Mm.
or maybe love me the way I want to be loved, I can be really tempted to doubt that he's good.
Yeah.
And, by the way, like, as I said, like, doubting God's goodness does not require tragedy. I mean, I think it can creep into literally just everyday life
Yeah.
just as dangerously. But when we no longer believe in the goodness of God, like when we no longer trust in his care, we ironically end up like running away from the very love that we need to live in. And so I think gratitude, like, actually takes us into his love. I really do believe that. And when we're living in his love, like, there's a scripture that is one of my favorite. It just says that perfect love casts out fear. So I think it's almost impossible to give thanks and to live in gratitude and simultaneously feel fear. I don't think
Yeah.
they can coincide with each other. So gratitude is like an anti-anxiety medicine to me. It really takes you into the Father's love, which then casts out fear and anxiety. And so what I have learned specifically about gratitude during this season is just that I've got a choice. I've got a choice every single day. I can look at this day or look at my circumstances and see everything that I wish was different, everything that's hard. And you know what? It might be very valid. Like, I'm looking at, what life is like for me in this season with a baby at home, trying to work full time while my husband's out because he's an essential worker, and trying to navigate that has been so hard. And I'm like, this is just hard. I have every excuse to wallow around in self-pity right now, but I've got a choice every day to wake up and see what's all the shortcomings, or I can actually see everything that is good. And man, there are days where that takes a lot of choice. But for me, it's been a practice every day of literally starting the day by writing out everything that's good, everything that I have to be thankful for. And by the way, like, I don't think gratitude has to be rooted in circumstances either, because sometimes circumstances you're like, I don't really see anything that's good right now. You may really struggle right now with finding that. But at the end of the day, it's not the gifts that fulfill, it's the God that's in the gifts, and it's the goodness of God that you can always, there are still so many good things to be thankful for just because of who he is and what he has given you. And so I just know that, even when we lost a baby, there were things that I had to say, this is a horrible loss, but what can I be thankful for in the midst of this horrible tragedy? I can be thankful for the fact that I was able to hold a life inside of me. I can be thankful for the hope of heaven that says, even though we lost this baby, I know where the baby is. I know that the baby's way better off than if he'd been on earth, like so many different things that even having to choose gratitude in the midst of tragedy, like, it is possible. And so I would say one of my favorite books is by Anne Voskamp, and I think it's called 1,000 Gifts. It's an oldie but a goodie. And I remember in that book, one of my favorite quotes that she said was that she had to always tell herself, no matter what the circumstances were around her, I think the quote was, no matter what unfolds here, God is always good and I am always loved. Like, always just being able to go back to that at the core. So
so powerful.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that so much. Over this time, God's just been speaking to me about every scripture I seem to read is like, find your home in him, find your home in him.
Yes.
It's such a powerful thing in actually finding our home, finding our worth, finding who we are in him, so that when every circumstance may change, it's like, actually, we still have the love of God. We still know he's good. We still know he's for us, and we become unshakable in a way,
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So the other
good.
question I kind of wanted to ask you, which is one I'm a huge believer in as well, is around the power of community. Because I know from my personal struggles, especially with having an eating disorder, it really thrived in isolation.
Yes.
And you isolate yourself sometimes when you're going through these struggles. So do you want to just open up a little bit about like the power of community?
Yes. I often think and sometimes say very similar to what you just said, that you cannot survive or thrive in isolation. I just don't believe it. I believe wholeheartedly that we were made for relationship. I think scripture is very clear about that. There's actually a proverb that's kind of harsh sounding, but it actually says, a man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment. Like, not a good idea. don't isolate yourself, and like I would use, even for example, what I referred to earlier, like when my husband and I went through our own tragedy, I don't know, I know at least over here in the States, like, miscarriage and loss, like that can be a very, very like hush hush, don't tell people,
Mm.
that's very private, it's reckless for you to tell people about that, and my husband and I both knew ourselves well enough to know, even when you find out you're pregnant, well, you shouldn't tell anybody for at least this long because you might lose the baby. I'm like, no, that's exactly why I need to tell everybody, because if we lose the baby, I'm going to need people around me. And some people aren't that way. They may be more private. That's just not our style. But, we decided to be very vocal, first of all, when we first found out we were pregnant, because we knew if anything happened, we wanted community. We needed people around us. And
Yeah.
it was so crazy because when we did end up losing the baby and we did have that community around us who had already celebrated us or celebrated with us whenever we were pregnant, now they were able to like actually be with us in that. I'm like, listen, this is a roller coaster. Like when you are trying to get pregnant, you get pregnant, all of the things around babies, it's an emotional roller coaster and all you people are going to go on it with us. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I'm not getting on the roller coaster by myself. You are all going with us, And so it was the love and the care that we received from people, from other people, was unbelievable. And there is now a richness and a depth to those relationships that I don't think would have ever been there otherwise, because they walked through the darkest days with us.
Yeah.
And, there's this word that I think for some people, they kind of might struggle with it because it often only has like a physical connotation to it, but it's this word intimacy. And we often say another way to say that is into me, you see.
Yeah.
And I just think there is a very, I mean, again, a lot of people think of it in the physical sense, but there's a powerful emotional and spiritual component to intimacy that has nothing to do with the physical. And it's this idea of truly allowing other people to see into us and to see the deepest parts of who we are. And I just don't think, unless people know our story, they know the feelings that go along with that story, they know our deepest struggles, they don't truly know us if they don't know those things. And when we will allow other people to know us in that way, we can be joined, on the journey of life together with people. And it doesn't mean it has to be this massive group of people. It means finding safe people. There's an awesome book by Cloud and Townsend called Safe People. Oh my goodness, I could not more highly recommend that resource. Basically everything by Cloud and Townsend is Henry Cloud and John Townsend. They're amazing. Everything they've ever written, everyone needs to buy it. But it's important to know how to identify safe people and invite those people into that inner circle that you have. And, I know some people who, are just like, well, I don't need that. I'm fine. I've been fine with that. I'm not one of those kinds of people. I'm private. I don't want people in my life and my business, blah, blah, blah. I know a lot of people who would say that. And what I would say to them is, would you maybe just consider the possibility that there is a richness and a depth to life that you might be missing out on by not engaging in that and by not having those kinds of relationships? And certainly if you're going through struggle and difficulty, trying to do that alone, would you just consider that there might be something greater that you're missing out on by not having that?
Wow. That's powerful. That's so powerful. Yeah, I remember community being a huge part of me overcoming an eating disorder too. Like, obviously, I probably wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my parents noticing
Yeah,
that I was
yeah.
struggling, because I didn't even really know what was going on.
Mm.
And I remember just my parents fighting for me, but also my mum, she'd leave me these little truth notes on my bed every single day.
Mm.
I used to get really angry and kind of tear them up and throw them away. But basically that
Oh,
I was reading the truth every day,
yeah,
and then it was kind of my friends actually just being able to be there as friends and being able to have fun with me and bring some sort of normality to life. But then my church
yes,
family, who would stand with me, pray with me, believe with me, speak truth, speak life, speak hope over me. So I think
yeah, it's
community is
powerful.
such a crucial thing when you're struggling. Um,
Absolutely. And I would encourage people too, like, don't wait until you're struggling and then be like, oh, I should probably have some people now. No. It's in those moments where maybe things are just good, and like you start fostering those relationships in your life, and then when, you know, things go bad, like you've already got that community around you. It's really, really hard in the midst of a dark season or in the midst of struggle to have that energy even for building relationships, you know, because you're kind of sometimes just in survival mode. And so no matter where you might be in your story and in your journey right now, if you don't have that, man, press in and find it. It's lifeblood.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, because we all go through different things. Like sometimes you can have a great season and you're right, you
Mm-hmm.
strengthen those relationships, you have those relationships, and then seasons
Yeah.
can change.
Yeah.
But you have the people there which almost become your army in the battle, you know, whatever
Yeah.
struggle you're kind of going through. And yeah, I love what you're saying, how there's such a depth, but I also love what you're saying about how it's finding safe people. Because I think so
Yes.
many people have kind of probably just told anyone and everyone, but then they've been burnt from it. All those people kind of haven't supported them in the right way, or maybe people had their own agendas, you know. I think
Yes.
it's finding those safe people who are really going to be there, who really care for
Mm-hmm.
you, and who can actually
Mm-hmm.
journey it with you and journey it
Absolutely.
through, not just kind of the start, but kind of journey it through.
Yes.
I think that's a
Yes.
really good thing.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think about a lot of the young women who've come to our residential program, and they have gone through exactly what you're saying. Like they've been burned, they've been hurt, they've been wounded. Um, and part of it is like I said, just being able to identify what a safe person is, but also it's about like where where are you most likely to find some safe people? Now, are there people like within the walls of a church that are going to wound you and hurt you and that might not be trustworthy? Yeah, they probably are. I'm not going to say just because someone goes to church, they're a safe person, you know,
Oh,
but
definitely.
is that a likely place to find some safe people? Yes, 100%, you know. And if you don't think I think one of the things that I've loved is hearing young women who've gone through our program, and they many times when they're sharing their testimony at the end of all of it, they're like, I did not realize there were people I could trust until I came
Wow.
here. And we're like, hey, guess what? The only safe people are not at Mercy. Like there are other safe people in the world, in the places that you're going to live. There are safe people. They exist. And so it's knowing that it's possible, and really taking that time and intentionality to seek those people out.
I love it. I love it. I love everything you've been talking about today. I know it would have
Uh,
impacted so many people. And I think like such great tools, which people like can use them practically too, to actually start to see change in their life. And like you're saying, it's not an overnight thing, but it's actually, I mean, you can't build a house overnight. Well, I've never seen
that's
anyone
right.
build a house overnight.
That's right.
Tools to get started and the tools
Yeah,
to keep going.
that's right.
Build a life of freedom and, you know, a relationship and yeah. So no, thank you
Absolutely.
so much for coming on and sharing your
Thank you,
wealth of
Jess.
knowledge. And I love what you guys are doing. You guys do amazing, amazing work. So yeah,
Thank you, Jess. I love what you're doing there too. Such an honor to be part of this. So thank you.
thank you.